Well, welcome everybody to our monthly updates. I don't think we went last month. I think I was sunning myself in.
You were locked away.
I was locked in
COVID.
That's right.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. So this month we're going to do salary sacrifice. So it's a word that's bandied around a lot. So we'll unpack it probably in the superannuation context, because in theory people can salary sacrifice for a range of options. We'll talk about superannuation.
Yeah, so in my world, salary sacrifice really kind of refers to super.
Yep.
And I sort of term salary packaging to the other
true.
pieces that you can
Good distinction. Yep.
You can package for under your employment. I love salary sacrifice because in my mind it's a good win for clients.
Yep.
It's also a really good tax tool,
It is.
and it's a progressive tax tool, and it also enables
What do you mean by progressive?
So if you're investing, I like dollar cost averaging going into the market.
So that dollar cost means you go in over a period of time.
Yep. So salary sacrifice going into superannuation, when your payroll does it for you, to me, puts that tool into play, and you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
So as long as your employer is paying your super on a regular basis, ideally fortnightly, but we know that doesn't occur in most cases. It does in most cases, but in some cases it might.
So this is the superannuation guarantee, which is now 10% of your gross wage.
Yeah.
So I think legally the employer has to pay once a quarter.
Yep.
But some employers pay it fortnightly or in line with other payroll cycles.
Yeah.
So that's a contribution the employer makes. And what's salary sacrifice mean for an individual?
Well, the salary sacrifice is the portion that you agree with your employer that you want to put in yourselves, basically. So, I mean, obviously, your employer will meet the super guarantee law, 10%, and then depending on how much your salary is there a gap in the cap that you can contribute yourself?
Yeah. Let's go through an example. So if your salary, say, $80,000 a year, so your employer will put in $8,000, 10%, and so you may decide to salary sacrifice, say, $10,000 out of the 80.
Yeah.
And so what are the mechanics and what would make people decide $10,000 versus $5,000, say?
For me personally, it comes down to, I suppose, number one, do you have the ability to have money left over to do that strategy? So that's the first tick to get right.
Yeah.
Because the reason why you do it is effectively about reducing tax. But if you can't afford to do it, or if you can't afford to maximise it, there might be amounts that you can afford to do it, but it's depending on what you need to live off.
Yeah.
So if they put in, additional 10,000 in themselves, we know that the cap at the moment, with the maximum amount that that you can put in a pre-tax environment, is 27,500.
Yeah, that's per annum. So if the employer's putting 10,000 or $8,000 in that example, then the employee has an option to put another 19,500 in a super if they want to, or can afford to, as you say.
Yeah. So then it comes back to, can you afford to put 10,000 in?
Yep.
Yeah. And if you can, then you're moving money into a concessionally taxed environment.
Yep. So what's concessionally taxed look like?
Well, concessionally taxed in my head is moving money from a higher tax environment to a lower tax environment.
Yep.
And that's what super is designed for, to encourage people to move money in.
Yeah. So if in that example, so if someone's on $80,000 and the boss gives them a, say, $3,000 pay rise, they would lose money to the tax man.
Yeah.
They're in the 32.5% tax bracket.
Yeah.
So you're going to lose basically a third of that to the tax man.
Yes.
And so the argument for, say, taking that pay rise and putting it into super as a scenario would be that the super fund gets taxed at 15%,
Correct.
not 32.5%
Correct.
in your own name.
Yeah.
The downside, obviously, is that you don't have access to that spare cash, so you're putting it aside to the rainy day or your retirement.
Yeah,
fund,
which is
effectively.
usually your preservation age, which is normally around age 60, depending on when you retire.
Yeah.
So it's a really good advantage. So you need to fund it, and you need to be able to I suppose, think critically of why you're doing it, and it's about building up your nest egg for retirement. And
so your argument is because you could, as an alternative, wait to the end of the financial year and make a one lump sum for an amount up to within the $27,500 cap.
Yeah.
So your argument is to do it each pay because I suppose you win from the compounding effect of having more of a drip feed approach, and it goes in earlier rather than waiting to the end of the financial year.
Yeah, and I mean, I like it because trying to time markets, and presently at the moment, markets are reasonably good and people are getting good returns.
Yep.
I suppose the alternative is if you didn't put it into super, where would you put it? A lot of people would probably make the choice of putting that extra money into a mortgage, for example.
Yeah.
In my mind at the moment, mortgage rates are really low.
Yeah.
There's a difference in the return potential between super at the moment.
Yeah.
So there's, if you look at it from a perspective, where do you think you will get a better return in the next 12 months? Potentially better in the superannuation environment.
Mm-hmm.
So the dollar cost averaging is a good way, or the salary sacrificing fortnightly in.
Yeah.
Is a good way of smoothing out when you go into the market.
Yeah.
But sometimes you go in when there's a high or when there's a low.
Yeah.
And timing those type of things is very, very difficult.
Yeah, so if you went with the alternative model of putting, say, a $10,000 lump sum in June each year, then you take the risk that, your market might not be the right timing for that contribution.
Yeah. But that's still a good strategy as long as you're parking, unless you're using that to offset a liability, in my mind, in terms of an interest rate. So mortgages have become useful for that.
So what do you mean exactly offset a lot? So if you've got the money
rather than sitting
rather than sitting in a cash account earning 0.001%.
0.000%. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So the other option, you do have it sitting in an offset account or a redraw facility.
Yeah. So that's what I was saying, be critical about what you do and the why.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of flow-on strategies from what we do in financial streams as well, in terms of you can use that strategy to assist you paying for insurance premiums and things like that.
Within super, like life policies and like that?
So it becomes a good way of funding life insurance
with
a concessional tax environment.
Yeah.
So that's a good strategy. And also there's a wider financial planning strategies that we can look at in terms of moving money into your spouse's name and so forth as well. But that's probably another discussion at some point.
Yeah. So the mechanics of setting up a salary sacrifice arrangement, what's the process?
Normally through your payroll.
Yep.
Yeah. So your payroll will set
that up. Your payroll department,
yeah.
pay person.
And they'll pay that through and they'll code it correctly to the super fund.
Yeah, so you get less in your pay packet or in your bank account each week but check your pay slip to make sure that amount of salary sacrificing is also being sent to your super fund as well.
Yeah.
And with MyGov and stuff like that now, people can double check that it's going to the correct account, etc.
Yeah, it's great. It's a good tool.
Much more visibility. Yeah. And another little trick, not that many employers do it, but just double check that you are still getting the full superannuation guarantee amount on your grossed up amount, not your amount after salary sacrifice.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a good tax advantage. It's got to be funded. You've got to be regular with it to get the total advantage out of it. But it's a good little win.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a set and forget strategy.
Yeah, that's important.
And you get used to it very easily
Yeah.
once you've committed to that strategy.
Yeah, and then our scenario, you've got you're comparing 32.5%, which is really, if you throw Medicare levy in, it's 34.5%.
Yeah.
2% Medicare, so 34.5% versus 15%.
Yeah.
So it's 9.5%. You've saved the 34.5% in your pocket today.
Yeah.
And the 15% comes out of tomorrow's bucket because the super fund pays the 15%. You don't have to fund it out of your own pocket. So in cash terms, you've sort of effectively got over a third of it as effectively a tax refund.
Yes.
In the current environment.
Yeah. And given that I suppose the super guarantee amount of 10%, ideally that's good as getting in the right area.
Yep.
Ideally, what we see is the contributions probably should be a little bit higher.
So 12 to 15?
12 to 15. I mean, I suppose there's a lot of commentary around 15% being a good number to contribute in terms of your employment wages.
Yeah.
Ultimately to get you to a position where you can retire.
So in that, if you subscribe to that sort of hypothesis or theory, employees put in 10%, you top it up to 15 with another 5 out of your own salary sacrifice.
Yeah.
As a scenario. Bear in mind that I think it's legislated that 10 will become 12 over the next, I can't remember, 3 years or 4 years or something.
Yeah.
So that gap will be breached by the employer guarantee as well.
Yeah, which will be great.
Right now, it's a 10% employer, and then top it up accordingly for yourself.
That's right. Any other questions?
No. I think you've covered it all.
I just want to end up in saying that to me it's a really good strategy for flow-on strategies. And as I said, it helps funding of insurances. It helps doing contribution splits to your spouse. It moves effectively money from a low tax environment, high tax environment to a lower tax environment, and potentially to a zero tax environment once you retire. So it stacks up as a good long-term strategy. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Mike.
I hope people got something out of the salary sacrifice update for the month, and stay tuned. We'll bring you something else in the financial stream space in a month's time. So thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.